The year is 1813. The vast plains of Saxony are about to become the stage for the largest, bloodiest battle in European history up to that point. A clash of empires so immense it would be forever known as the Battle of the Nations. This is the story of the Battle of Leipzig, the four-day inferno that shattered Napoleon Bonaparte's hold on Europe and sealed the fate of his grand empire. It was a confrontation involving over 500,000 soldiers from nearly every nation in Europe, a maelstrom of courage, betrayal, an unprecedented carnage that would redraw the map of the continent just a year earlier. Napoleon had stood at the gates of Moscow, master of Europe, but his disastrous Russian campaign of 1812 had turned triumph into catastrophe. Of the more than 600,000 men who marched into Russia, fewer than 100,000 staggered back. The myth of Napoleonic invincibility was broken. Seizing this moment of weakness, the monarchies of Europe, long chafing under French domination, saw their chance. Prussia, which had suffered humiliating defeat in 1806, was the first to act, signing an alliance with Russia. Soon, Austria, Sweden, and Great Britain joined them, forging the formidable Sixth Coalition. The singular goal, the complete overthrow of Napoleon. Napoleon, however, was a master of recovery. With astonishing speed, he raised a new army largely composed of young, inexperienced conscripts, but stiffened by veteran cadres throughout the spring and summer of 1813. He fought a series of battles, winning tactical victories at Lutzen and Bautzen, but these were not the decisive blows he needed. The coalition armies, guided by the Trachenberg Plan, adopted a cunning strategy, avoid direct confrontation with Napoleon himself, and instead target his marshals. This strategy of attrition slowly bled the French forces, forcing Napoleon onto the defensive and funneling all armies, both French and coalition, towards a single, unavoidable point of concentration, the city of Leipzig. By mid-October, the trap was set. Napoleon found himself at Leipzig with around 190,000 men, facing a colossal coalition force that numbered over 360,000 and was growing by the day. The French were caught in a ring of steel. The Allied commander Tsar Alexander I of Russia, King Frederick William III of Prussia, and the Austrian Field Marshal Schwarzenberg prepared to deliver the final blow. Napoleon, ever the gambler, decided to stand and fight, hoping to defeat the coalition armies in detail before they could fully unite. The stage was set for a battle of apocalyptic proportions. The battle began on October 16th. The main fighting erupted south of Leipzig, around the village of Watchow. French artillery thundered, tearing bloody lanes through the advancing Austrian columns. The fighting was savage, with villages changing hands multiple times. In a desperate bid to shatter the coalition center, Napoleon ordered a massive cavalry charge led by his flamboyant brother-in-law, Joachim Murat. 10,000 French horsemen crashed into the Allied lines, sweeping aside infantry and artillery for a moment. It seemed like a classic Napoleonic victory was at hand. They broke through and galloped towards the command post of the Allied monarchs, but the Russian and Prussian Imperial Guard cavalry countercharged, and in a chaotic, swirling melee, Murat's attack was repulsed. By day's end, both sides had suffered horrific losses, but Napoleon had failed to achieve a decisive breakthrough. The first day was a bloody stalemate. The 17th of October saw a relative lull in the fighting. Both sides were exhausted, busy tending to their wounded and reorganizing their battered formations. It was a day of ominous stillness, the calm before an even greater storm, crucially, massive coalition reinforcements, including the Swedish army under former French Marshal Bernadotte and the Russian army of Poland. Under Bennigsen, were arriving on the battlefield, tightening the noose around Leipzig, Napoleon, realizing his perilous position, sent a message to the Austrians offering a truce. But it was too late. The Allies, sensing victory, were determined to finish him. October 18th was the decisive day. The coalition launched an all-out assault from every direction. The sheer weight of numbers was overwhelming. The French, fighting with desperate courage, were pushed back on all fronts. Then came the turning point. As French and German troops fought side by side defending the village of Ponsdorf, the Saxon contingent, supposedly Napoleon's allies, suddenly switched sides. They turned their guns on the French and marched over to join the coalition. This defection created a massive gap in the French line, causing a crisis that spread like wildfire. The psychological blow was devastating. One of Napoleon's last German allies had abandoned him in the heat of battle. The French defense began to crumble. By nightfall, Napoleon knew the battle was lost. His only option was to organize a retreat. The only escape route was a single bridge, the Lindenau Bridge, over the Ulster River. The entire French army, along with its artillery, wagons, and thousands of wounded, had to funnel through this one bottleneck. The retreat began under the cover of darkness, but soon descended into chaos. The Allied armies pressed their attack on the morning of the 19th, storming the city of Leipzig itself. Then, disaster struck. In the panic and confusion, a nervous corporal, tasked with demolishing the Lindenau Bridge after the army had crossed, blew it up prematurely. Thousands of French troops were trapped on the wrong side of the river. Many drowned trying to swim across the cold, fast-flowing water. Others were killed or captured. Among the dead was the heroic Marshal Poniatowski, who had only been made a Marshal of France 3 days prior. The aftermath was a scene from hell. The Battle of Leipzig was the deadliest conflict of the Napoleonic Wars. Over the 4 days of fighting, the French suffered around 70,000 casualties killed, wounded, or captured. The coalition lost nearly 60,000 men. The fields and villages around the city were littered with the dead and dying. The sheer scale of the carnage shocked even the most hardened veterans of the era. For Napoleon, Leipzig was the beginning of the end. His army in Germany was shattered. His German allies had deserted him, and his empire east of the Rhine had evaporated. He was forced back across the river, no longer the conqueror, but the defender of France itself. The victory at Leipzig galvanized the Sixth Coalition, paving the way for their invasion of France in 1814. Less than 6 months later, the Allies would march into Paris, and Napoleon Bonaparte would be forced to abdicate, his grand ambitions reduced to exile on the small island of Elba. The Battle of the Nations had not only decided the fate of a war, it had brought down an emperor and ended an age. That was a brutal, bloody testament to the cost of ambition and the turning of the tides of history. Thank you for watching. If you found this documentary interesting, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories from history. We'll see you next time.